Chullin Daf Kuf Ches. There's a story where a woman was giving birth, and the doctor said that it doesn't look good for her. So they ran to the Taz and they asked the Taz that he should write a kameya amulet so they could give the woman so she can live. The Taz initially refused and eventually gave in, and he wrote something and they gave it to the woman and she lived. They used that amulet over and over for many women for generations, and it worked wonderfully until one day somebody decided to open up the amulet and see what exactly did the Taz write. And he opens it up and he sees that it says, Rebbeinu Shalom, in the schus of the Amal HaTorah that I had in the sugya of Tipas Chalav, please save this woman. And then they say the amulet stopped working, etc. Today's sugya is the sugya of Tipas Chalav. Quite a difficult sugya, but we are going to summarize it and try to make it as easy as possible. The Mishnah says that if somebody put one drop of milk on a piece of meat that's protruding from a pot of meat, according to Rashi, it's semi-submerged in the pot, and he did not stir the pot, he did not stir the pot, he did not cover the pot, if that milk is enough to give the piece of meat flavor, in other words, it's not batel b'shishim, it's more than 1/60th of the meat, then the piece of meat is also. If he covered the pot or he stirred the pot, then what happens is this drop of milk has to contend, so to speak, with the rest of the pot. So now that milk has to be at least 1/60th of the entire pot. It's not just dealing with one piece of meat, it's dealing with the whole pot because he stirred the whole pot and the whole pot is like one piece of meat. Says Abaya, he's going off topics, sort of, and he says that from this Mishnah, from the halacha of Basar B'chalav, we learn to the rest of the Torah when it comes to the Isser of eating foods, that the flavor of food is the Isser D'Oraisa. In other words, if you were to remove the source from the pot, the flavor that remains behind, even though it's negligible, you can't really see it, you can't feel it, but since you could taste it, that's enough to make food aser. Because if you were to tell me that Basar B'chalav is a big chiddush, and why is it a big chiddush? Says Rashi, there's two chiddushim in Basar B'chalav. First of all, you're taking two completely kosher foods. You're taking milk, which is kosher on its own, and you're taking meat, which is kosher on its own. But if you combine the two ingredients together, that creates the Isser. That's only in Basar B'chalav, and nothing else in the Torah is similar. Another chiddush is that Basar B'chalav is the only food in the world, in the Torah, that if you cook, you're over just for cooking and not for eating. If you were to take a piece of pork and cook it, you're not over anything. So since you might say that since it's such a big chiddush, you can't learn anything else from it, I will tell you, if that's the case, if it's such a big chiddush, then why does the Mishnah say that the flavor is what causes the pot to be aser? Just the actual fact that you are cooking should be enough to make it aser. That's what Abai says. Comes Rav and says, wait a minute, that's not true. Maybe what the Torah is saying, maybe it is a chiddush, and the Torah says you have to cook it, because that's the way to make it aser, by putting flavor into the food, by cooking it, that creates the iser. Nu Allah, Rav says, that once this piece of meat that's sticking out of the pot somewhat, according to Tosfos, it's completely sticking out, according to Rashi, somewhat, once it absorbs milk, it itself becomes like a piece of nevela, a piece of isser, and therefore it can impart isser to the rest of the pot. Meaning, Rav holds that efshel soichtoi aser, meaning, if I could take a piece of meat and I could cook out all the milk from it, and a scientist will take it to the lab and see that there's not a single molecule of dairy inside this piece of meat, it remains aser, because once it's aser, it's forever aser. It's like a piece of nevela. You can't cook a nevela out of a nevela. You can't cook the milk out of the meat. So since Rav holds that, it becomes a piece of nevela, and the rest of the pot becomes aser. Now we learned before that there's a concept, if you have two minim, you have a piece of nevela, like in the chart, number one, and they have the same exact type of food, but it's kosher, number two, and you cook it in a pot of water and vegetables, whatever, that's number three. That's not the same min as one and two. The halacha is that number two cannot combine with one against number three, nor can number two combine with number three to gang up against number one. We get rid of number two as if it's not here. So why don't we do that over here? Because we're talking about, the Gemara says that Rav is talking about a situation where number three is not actually soup. It's meat that's ground very finely, it's puree, it's the same min as one and two. So now you have all three of the same min, and therefore you don't use the soup, number 3, to gang up against number 1. Now everything is 1 min, and min b'minoi, according to Rav, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, loy batal. Since it's the same min, you cannot be mevatel it. There are others that say, efshel l'soichtoi, other amiroyim, efshel l'soichtoi, mutar, like Shmuel and Rish Lakish. Now, this that Rav says, he holds that if a piece of meat, a small piece of meat, less than a 60th of an entire pot of cooking milk, if a small piece of meat fell into the entire pot, the halacha is, says Rav, that you're allowed to drink the entire milk because it's mevatel the meat, but the meat itself is also. We have to say that this is a case where the piece of meat fell into a pot that's boiling hot, and he removed that piece of meat while it was still boiling hot. Otherwise, we'd have a big problem here. Because the piece of meat that fell in absorbs some milk, but it also is pilot the milk. It spits the milk back out into the pot. Once that milk becomes asur, it became an avela, like Rav said, an avela, chatichanas in avela. The avela will in turn make the rest of the pot asur, and you would not be able to drink the milk. Therefore, you have to say it's talking about a situation where the milk doesn't come back out from the meat because it was boiling, and when it's boiling, it doesn't have the ability. It has the ability to absorb, but not to spit back out into the pot. And you took it out while it's still hot. According to Rav, according to everybody, but according to Rav, we have a halacha here as follows. In order to be over on basa b'chalav, you need a full kazayis of meat and a full kazayis of dairy. And then you cook them together, and then you are over. What if you ate a half a kazayis of meat and a half a kazayis of dairy? You're not over, says Rav, not on the cooking part and not on the eating part, because you have to start out with a full kazayis of each. However, Rav admits that if you cooked it initially, 1 kazayis of meat and 1 kazayis of dairy, you cooked it initially and you made it isser, and then you went and you ate a half a kazayis of meat and a half a kazayis of milk, then you are over. Levi says even if you just cook it initially, half a kazayis and half a kazayis, you're over for cooking and you're over for eating. What is the shear for cooking? The shear is that it should be mevushel kol tzarkoi. Shaila and Rishonim, what that means, is it kemachol ben drusoi, or it has to be very cooked. The point is that a goy could eat it. That's considered. It's not just a few seconds, a few minutes. It has to be completely cooked. The Gemara wants to prove that this shaila that we brought down, efshel soichtoi asur mutar, is actually machlekes tanoi. Because the question is like the same case that we had before in this part of the sugya. A drop of milk hits a piece of meat that's protruding out of the pot. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he says like Rav that it becomes an avela and the whole pot becomes asur. According to Rabbanan, only if it gives enough flavor to the rest of the pot. In other words, it's 1/60th of the whole entire pot, everything in the pot. Says Rebbe, I like Rabbi Yehuda in some things and I like Rabbanan in something. I like Rabbi Yehuda when he didn't mix the pot and he didn't cover the pot. Now, obviously, what Rebbe meant to say is, if he didn't mix it completely, ever, then there's no way, scientifically, the Gemara says, that it should go from the 1 piece of meat into the rest of the pot. He didn't stir the pot. So it has to be that he meant that he didn't stir it in the beginning, and he didn't put the cover on in the beginning, but he put the cover on in the end. Then the question is, how come the rest of the pot, why doesn't it make the rest of the pot asur? At the end of the day, it absorbed, and then it spit out. So nothing should be asur. The whole pot should be mutter. If it spit out, it never had the ability to make everything asur. Obviously, Rebbe holds that efshel sachtoi asur. Even though it spit it out afterwards, it's too late. Once that piece of meat became asur, that's why it has the ability to make the rest of the pot asur. Now, Rabbi Yehuda holds that he stirred it all the way in the beginning. If he stirred all the beginning from beginning to end, then where did the first piece of meat even get the ability to absorb? Now he has to contend with the whole pot. The answer is, you're right. Rabbi Yehuda is just saying this exera, maybe he didn't stir it properly, and therefore we have to be concerned and not make and say that the whole pot is asur. Have a wonderful day.